Welcome to the Passive Income Podcast, July live stream. Super excited for this live stream round panel with Alexis, Tiffany, and Ms. Novi. Also streaming for the first time ever live on the Kick platform. So if you're watching over there, please give us a follow and let's just get into it. We'll go around the round table and everyone can reintroduce themselves. You've all been here before as one-on-one guests, and I'm hoping to have a option. So, Alexis, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Alexis, and I am currently residing in Atlanta, Georgia. You can follow me on Twitter at Alexis_investor, also on Instagram as Proverbs31investor. And I am currently in the banking sector as far as my career, and I consider myself a long-term investor.
Nice. Tiff.
Yeah, hey everyone. So my name is Tiffany Grant. I run Money Talk with Tiff, which is a financial education platform. It's a blog, it's a podcast, and I'm just here to educate people about money. I am a full-time entrepreneur. This is what I do full-time, and I love it here. So definitely check it out.
Awesome. Ms. Novi.
All right. Hey, everyone. It's Miss Novi, better known as Miss Invest on Twitter, we.in.vest on Instagram. I'm a mompreneur, uh, heavy dividend investor, long-term investor. I dab into crypto and also options trading, but basically showing people that you can build from nothing to something and be financially free one day.
Awesome. So, first comment, greetings everyone. Thank you 50K Torchic. So, yeah, let's
Hey.
Awesome. First, I'm going to address the elephant in the room, and I didn't warn you before we started, before we went live. But the elephant in the room, I think, is kind of obvious. I'm an old white guy. You are all beautiful, young black women, and I'm just another old white guy. But I really want to hear your take on being a woman in finance, and then also being a woman of color in finance. So, whoever wants to take that one first, feel free.
I'll go first. Woo, very great question, Dave. For me myself, starting heavy in 2020, well, to the world, but I dabbed in by myself in 2016. Uh, I got a lot of doors slammed in my face because I didn't have a lot of money, specifically for those two things you just mentioned. And from our community, it's not well known. Not too many people that look like us were in the positions to help people that look like us. So I was once told by my bank I
Right.
needed 100K to start, and it was discouraging. But I
Yeah.
didn't stop.
Right.
I found Stash, started with that, with the little income that I had. Went from there to Robinhood to TD Ameritrade and multiple crypto accounts now. And I studied 2019. And when the pandemic came, 2020, I was able to start with $5,000. From 2020 to 2021, I turned that 5K into $85,000 in 2021 at the peak of the
Wow.
market. So I didn't give up. Yes, there
Right.
wasn't many that looked like me. It was a lot of people that could not help me. My parents, deep into their 401ks and heavily invested, but they could not help me. They didn't know what to
Right.
do. So I studied. I found like-minded individuals like myself. I joined groups and I began teaching people because I didn't have a me. So I began to be a me for everybody else. And
Yeah.
my number one thing to tell people, and especially us in our community, don't give up and don't ever think a small amount is not enough. Starting is key.
Yeah. Just get started. Right. That's a that's a great answer. Alexis or Tiff, do you want to touch on that topic as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I agree with everything she just said. It is very different because we're not, generally when you think of finance, you think of a white old male, and we're young Black
This guy,
females.
right?
And
Old white
so,
guy.
right, we're young Black females. And so it's a completely different paradigm
Landscape.
shift.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a whole different thing for us. But to her point, I started my blog in 2017 for the same reason. Everybody kept coming to me for this financial education that they wasn't getting anywhere else. And so I was like, okay, if one or two people have this question, then there's probably hundreds that look like me that have the same question. So let me try to get it out there on the World Wide Web. And so I had the same motivations to start this. I will say, and I'll just do personal stories. When I first started, it was like 2018. So I was like maybe a year in. I had a guy call me, and it was a Black guy. And he was like, "Oh, I see you're a money coach," because he had one of my cards. He was like, "Well, I'm a financial advisor." And he just said it so like, shady. And I'm just, for me, I'm like, we can work together, we can, collaborate, all types of stuff. But it's that type of, I would say, like shady energy sometimes, as a female in the industry, and not just saying Black female, just as a female in general. You can say something, a guy can say the exact same thing, and people will go with the guy. And so, it's a lot of that. But all of that to say, that's why we're out here, so we can inspire other Black females, to get out here and do this as well. So I just wanted to tag onto that. I agree with everything she just said.
Yes, I definitely
Excellent.
agree with Miss Novi, and also just like where I am from, and then the culture there with my community, um, and working in the banking industry, I didn't see a lot of people that looked like me there. And as I stated on the previous podcast episode, just when I started off as a bank teller, I'm watching people come into the bank and sit with financial advisors, and I didn't see anyone that looked like me doing that. And so for me, it was just more so like, hey, people are out there building wealth, and our wealth is diminishing. How can I be a part of the change and represent the change and help my people think different when it comes to money and building wealth?
All great comments, and I hear from all three of you a similar thing of like, I didn't have a me, I didn't have someone that looked like me to look up to, and now I have to say the three of you are becoming that me for someone else, some other little girl out there, and that's absolutely amazing and inspiring, and I commend each and every one of you for being that person for someone. So that's great. That's amazing.
Yeah, also, I think, Ms. Novi, you mentioned something that was very important. Just people have this false perception that you have to start with all this money when it comes to investing. And I love to tweet daily, like I make a $1 investment to Microsoft every day just to prove a point that I don't need all this money, even though I have like direct deposits that go into auto pay with investing, just the consistency and to show people you really don't have to start with much. Like $1 a day will take you so much far. If you look at these companies that we invest in and their gains over the years, like Miss Novi, you're big on Tesla, like 1,000 percentages of increase in the stock. And what does that look like when it comes to $1? Like you don't need a whole bunch of money to invest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll
Go
just
ahead, Tiff.
add there. Yeah, I'll add there. Investing is way more accessible than it used to be.
Yeah.
I know when I first started back in like 2009, 2010, I needed $3,000 to get started. And I was so happy when I, scrounged up my pennies and I was like, oh, I got 3,000, I can start investing. But now you can do it with as little as $1. Like it's really not that deep. And I even have clients and they're like, well, I want to get started investing. I'm like, just do $25, if you can afford it. $25 a month, that adds up pretty quickly, over the course of a year. And I'll be honest, I'm pretty new to dividend investing. I just started my profile last year, and it has already grown pretty good. So I'm new to the dividend realm, but I love it here so far. But to their point, it doesn't take much to get started and to sustain and keep it going.
Oh, we just lost Miss Novi. Hopefully, she'll be right back, but we'll keep going. And
Yeah, we had so many obstacles, Tiffany, as far as like the minimum requirements when it came to investing, the huge fees. I'm so
Mhm.
thankful that they got rid of those fees and now we can invest these minimum amounts with no fees attached, except for maybe like a small expense ratio.
right,
Absolutely. Definitely fintech. It has grown so much over the years. And I am so grateful because there's so many tools out there now to help people get their financial lives in order, whether it's investing, budgeting, whatever it is, it's a whole different landscape than it was 10 years ago or so.
Yeah.
yeah, or 20 or 30 years ago, it's
Right.
changed.
Look, I was trying not to go back that far.
Calling
Yeah,
in
it's
those orders, right?
yeah,
Right.
it's changed immensely. But to your point, even in the early to mid, or 2000 to 2010, when online banking became a thing, and you could suddenly trade through your online bank account, but you were still expected to pay, say, a $30 commission on every single trade, so you had to like make it worthwhile. And then more recently, within the last 10 years or so, those banking platforms, the ones I'm familiar with here in Canada, have went down to sort of a $10 commission, which still to me seems unreal because now we can just download an app on our phone and have free commissions, right? So, and and that's, to me, that's one of the keys too, is like you can have these free commissions, so you're not worried about that extra $10 in basically just going away. You can start at $1, $2, like you said, $25 a month is an amazing start as well. So just get started, right?
Right. I think when I first got started, I really didn't know too much. And it was that thing where I had all this information, but it was information overload. So it was kind of dangerous because I had all this information, but I wasn't acting on it.
Right.
And one of the things I was like, I'm just going to jump into this, but I'm going to do index funds because that seems like the safest bet for me at this moment until I feel more comfortable with branching out into stocks.
Yeah, and obviously index funds and ETFs are an incredible way to start as well, right?
Yeah.
I love them. That's still the base of my portfolios. It's definitely the indexes and the mutual funds. Those are the bases for me. And then, like I said, when I got into dividend investing last year, that's when I finally bought like some individual stocks. So yeah, I'm more. Um, I'm more interested in making sure I match the market, at least as a baseline, and then I can play around with the rest, whether that be in a dividend stock or any other stock for that matter.
Ms. Novi just sent me a DM saying her phone overheated, but she's trying to get back on, so hopefully
Oh
she'll be back
no.
here shortly. Oh,
Mhm.
she's saying no video feed. I can't even put her on with. Oh, there we go. Okay, we're back. Ms. Novi, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, guys.
Awesome.
Sorry,
It's
my
okay. Thanks
phone
for coming back.
overheated.
Tiff was just talking about how she's a little bit new to dividend investing. So I was going to ask her, Tiffany, if or what that first individual company was. Sorry, Ms. Novi, we were also talking about like index funds and ETFs, and Tiff kind of mentioned that.
Okay, no
Then,
problem. Sorry, guys. My phone.
so Tiff, I'm just kind of wondering what that first individual company was that you purchased, and even what that first dividend payment was.
Yeah, so actually, my first foray into dividend investing was still in the form of mutual fund because I was still, trying to ease into the water. So it was SCHD.
Right.
So I bought some stock in that, and I was like, oh, okay, I can do this because I'm used to mutual funds. But as far as the first individual one, I want to say it was MMM. Triple M?
3M.
Yeah, 3M. There we go. I think that was the first individual one that I did. But like I said, the majority of it is in a mutual fund or an index fund. So I think we talked about it on our episode, Dave. FMEIX. I already had that. I didn't know that it was throwing off dividends like it was, but that happens to be my biggest dividend payer. So I was like, oh, okay, I was already doing this. I just didn't know it. Now I'm being more intentional about doing it. But yeah.
That's interesting. You definitely do become more intentional when you see those dividends arrive in your brokerage account, right? Like I was just
Yes,
explaining this the other day. It was
absolutely.
like
Yes. When you
money
see
just shows
those
up. It's
dividends, Dave, oh my goodness, that changes your outlook totally, totally. Now speaking, piggybacking on Tiff, I want to say my first ETF was, hmm, on Stash is different. They have different names for them, but they pretty much follow the same things on other platforms. So mainly, the largest one I had, it was called Blue Chips. That's what it was in. It was pretty much a little bit of Apple, Microsoft, McDonald's, Home Depot, a little bit of everything. And what made me invest in that specific one, I'm driving around where I stay, and I'm like, "Hey, I see all this stuff. If I don't shop in there already." So that's the type
yeah,
of things that I went with when I first started, and then branching off from ETFs into individual stocks. And one big thing was for me. You guys see me talk about it a lot, which is energy. Energy and gas is not going anywhere. We're not going to stop paying for it. So when I dabbed into ET, a lot of people told me to stay away from it in 2020. They cut their dividend from 30 cents to 15 cents. I started buying more. Bought my first 100 shares, then kept adding. I think I was a little under $5. Kept adding, and fast forward to now, I'm 146 shares from 1K. So it's like, never listen to people when they're telling you to, jump ship. If you understand
right.
a company and you believe in it, keep investing in it, and especially if they're paying you dividends. Just like Dave and Tiff said, and even Alexis, when you see those dividends drop, it's a whole different ball
It's a good
game,
feeling.
especially when they're adding up tremendously. But that's a good journey going from specifically just ETFs and index funds and into an individual company that you trust. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going to make a point there. You mentioned McDonald's and Home Depot, and I personally have spent a lot of money at both of those companies in my life, as I'm sure many of us have, right? So, and you're right. You drive around and you see these companies, and you're like, "Hey, I'm a customer there, and so are literally millions of other people." So you know that they're solid companies, and obviously you can dig deeper, getting into their earnings reports and balance sheets and everything else, but just the drive around test alone, right? Like the drive through at Starbucks and the amount of people in the parking lot at Home Depot on a Saturday morning, right? It's that's to me what almost a better test than digging into the financials.
For sure. And, to you all's point about seeing the dividends, because I downloaded Div Tracker. I don't know if y'all
Yes,
use that or not.
I
I
love
love
that
it.
app.
But
Oh,
I'm
gotta
like,
get that.
yeah, yeah, I love this app. And I'm just looking now. I'm like, oh, I'm up to what, $44.49 in annual dividend income, which is about, I think, like double from when I first started. So I'm like, ooh, this is nice.
Yeah.
I downloaded that app and they have a free version, and then they have a version where you could add more positions. I think for the free version you only allowed like five, and I ended up paying for the advanced version so I could add all of my positions, and it was like $11. And I am so cheap. I do not like paying fees and stuff like that. But I was like, Alexis, it's just one cup of coffee a year, and you're tracking your dividends. It's a great app.
Nice.
And
Love it.
So
before, like, so I was investing in like index funds and stocks and such, and I really wasn't into the whole dividend thing. But once I got into the whole dividend thing and I plugged in my numbers, I was like, oh my God, this is so nice. This is how much I'm making a year in dividends. Okay.
Right. And we're not endorsed, but if Div Tracker is listening, then let us know because
Right.
we'll
Tiff would like to be endorsed.
please. But no, it's just a really good app, and I enjoy it. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that. Like I've seen screenshots of that div tracker in on Twitter and whatnot, but I'm not familiar with it. I don't use it. I don't actually use any dividend tracker. I simply just use a nice basic old fashioned Excel spreadsheet and that's it.
yeah, we
Wow.
getting fancy over here.
I probably will someday go to that like whether it's that exact app or another one where I
Mhm.
can you know sort of watch that projected annual dividend income because I don't know. Part of me thinks I don't need the distraction. Like I know that every time I buy another share of something, that it increases. So, but yeah, at the end of the day, too, it is probably nice to see that number increasing
Mhm.
every time you buy a share or every time a drip happens or whatever, right?
Yeah. And then also, like, I'm goal oriented. So I set milestones for myself. And so I'm like, okay, I just knocked this milestone out. Let me get that dividend income up. And so it's nice also for that as well to
Mhm.
track.
Right.
For sure.
Awesome.
And just to add really quick, for me, it's looking at like the dividend calendar too. So like I know I'll get 32 cents this month, I'll get 68 cents next month, that type of thing. And then also, as I'm thinking strategically, I also want to diversify in when dividends are being paid out. And so I want to get more, maybe to fill in the July, instead of 32
Right.
cent by
Yes.
something that will, make that a little higher. Cause like right now, June, September, December, and March are my biggest months, but the rest of the months is like real tiny. So,
I've been
Yeah.
looking at that too and also posting on my Instagram page. I'm like, okay, June was like a really slow month for me. Where can I go back and see what positions I need to add to increase that June income?
Mhm.
So that's really
Yeah.
nice. And then also the app tells you if you don't invest another penny into the market or into your dividend portfolio, with your dividends being reinvested over the course of time based on maybe a 7% return and a 2% yield on your dividends, how far it's going to grow. So I really like that as well.
And while we're on this topic, really quick, let's pause for the cause. This is not investment advice. This is for educational and entertainment purposes only. I just want to
Only.
make sure we're covered here in the US.
Yeah. No. Same thing. Exactly. Not financial advice. We're just here for a good discussion, and if anybody gets anything out of our discussion, that's the whole point. So I am
For
curious
sure.
more too, Alexis. I know in our previous one-on-one, and even before we went live, we were talking about your position in the bank, and the bank that you work for is being taken over by the one of the big Canadian banks, BMO, Bank of Montreal. And very exciting for you that you get to buy those stocks at a discount at it, like an employee share purchase plan.
Yes.
Um, let's talk about that for a second because that's just amazing.
Yeah, I'm excited to build that position because my that company will offer a 401k match, and then outside of that, they do have the employee stock purchase plan,
Right.
in which they'll give the 10% discount off of the market price for that day. So I'm excited about building a position in the company that I work for. And it's kind of like giving
Yeah.
myself a little bit of a raise because I work for the
Yeah. Well, dude.
company and then now I'm going to have an additional income with those dividends.
Yeah. No, it's exactly like giving yourself a raise.
Yeah.
And Do you remember the skill testing question from before?
I'm sorry, the what?
The skill testing question of how long Bank of Montreal has been paying a dividend?
Oh my goodness. Is it 200 years, I believe,
It's getting
right? It's
close.
200 years. And they're one of the oldest, I mean, one of the companies that's been paying a dividend for the longest time.
Yeah, for sure. So
Up
it's
to
uh, Bank of Nova Scotia since 1829, and then BMO since 1832 or 33. So they're both coming up on 200-year anniversaries.
of dividend paying. That's
Yeah.
nice.
Could you
Which,
imagine if you had one of the originals, like
yeah,
probably when they had it in like the paper form?
Right.
It's probably
well,
worth the time.
yeah, right. It definitely would have been some paper form back, in the mid 1800s, right? They didn't have computers or anything electronic back then, so would have been amazing to have a great great grandfather or something buy 5 or 10 shares of those. They
Right.
would have done well over time, right?
Right, right.
Those stock certificates that they used to give people when they purchase shares, I kind of wish we still had those a little bit.
Yeah, it would be kind of neat, right? But
It
then all of a
would.
sudden, too, there's enough paper clutter in
Right.
probably in your house as there is in mine. So
But also, like, people jump in and out of these stocks so much.
now, because we can, right? You can
Right.
buy on your phone one day and sell it the next day, whereas back then, I'm sure it must have been a lot harder to buy and sell.
Yeah.
Well, I know it was even just in the 90s it was harder, so I can imagine what it was in the mid 1800s.
Fidelity did a survey on who gets the highest returns. And the survey came back that deceased people get the highest returns because they're not jumping in and out of the market, in and out of positions. It's just a set it and forget it type thing.
Right.
So the
It's
best
just buy and hold.
investors, the best investors are underground.
Right.
That's crazy.
It's just like buy and hold. Like, yeah. And
Yeah,
so,
well, you kind of have to hold that when you're at that point.
right, you don't have a choice. But it
So
was
was
just like, stop jumping in and out of the market,
Yeah,
buy these positions, do your research, buy and hold.
yeah,
That's
hold
the,
forever, right? Like just let the
Mhm.
dividend keep rolling in every month, every quarter, whatever it may be. Wow. Um, Tiff, before we went live, you were mentioning a conference in Atlanta
Mhm.
for women. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, sure. So, if anybody's familiar with FinCon, or if you're not, FinCon is their tagline is where money and media meet. So it's where people that are content creators in the personal finance realm get together and meet each other and talk and whatever. It's really fun. Highly recommend. It's in October this year in New Orleans, but they did a women spinoff of that called Women in Money. And there's an East Coast version, there's a West Coast version. The East Coast version, which is the one I'll be speaking on a panel at, is in Atlanta, and that is July 27th. So if you're interested in any of those events, whether it's the big FinCon or the Women FinCon, you can use code MoneyTalk10 to get $10 off and then also help a fellow creator.
Awesome. And get to see you live and in person on the panel.
Yeah, and I'm excited because we're diving deep into women issues as it relates. So, kind of like your first question when we first came on, just diving deep into that and in a safe space for women because it'll just be us. And so, we plan on talking about, being a single mom and in this industry or being single, with no spouse, no kids in this industry,
Right.
being married, like all the gamut. The
Yeah.
panel is very diverse, but just the gamut of being a woman in this industry and what that means, and how to, I guess, overcome those obstacles. So yeah.
Interesting. So that's you said in Atlanta, July 20.
Yes. So the East Coast version is in Atlanta, and then there's a West Coast version. I'll be honest, I'm not familiar because I'm not going to that one, but just going to the website. It's on the main FinCon website, and you can check it out if you're on that side.
There. Awesome.
I
Let's
love
talk
it. I mean, I think that women are breaking down so many barriers. I
for
was
sure.
reading that not too long ago that women were able to apply for credit. It wasn't that long ago.
Mm.
That yeah, so that's dope. I love it. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, it is crazy how far like women's rights have come, how far black rights have come, like just all types of things. And now is really the time to put your stake in, like stake your claim on, your money, your wealth, your life. And so I'm excited to be part of this whole paradigm. And even recently with 2020 and COVID, I've seen more and more people become in tune with their money as a
Yeah.
result of that. And I feel like even that has been phenomenal, just seeing more people pay attention.
And also, Tiffany, I have a question
Mhm.
with that, with the whole COVID thing. And you said you're starting to see people get serious about their money. Is that as that relates to like investing or emergency fund?
All of the above.
All of the
So honestly, I feel like COVID was a great reset for a lot of people because, unfortunately, a lot of people lost their jobs or, were no longer needed or they had to work from home. And so it kind of shook things up to where they're not going through their daily grind. And so now they're seeing, oh, like, let me see what this like budgeting looks like,
yeah.
or let me see what investing looks like, or let me see what being an entrepreneur looks like, because we had a lot of people jumping into that as well. And for me, I feel like you have to keep trying things. So like I feel like COVID really opened people's eyes to get out of the daily grind of their life, whatever that looked like, and just try different things, learn different things. A lot of people were tuned into the podcast or reading articles on the blog. And, the stuff has been there. But
Yeah.
when you're so into the grind, you don't realize that this knowledge is all around you now. And so, to answer your question, I feel like they just been paying more attention in general, just with everything money related.
That's good.
Yeah, I think 2020 and COVID was quite an eye opener for a lot of people. I think a lot of people realized that they were very much caught up in the rat race, extremely busy. All like I mentioned earlier, always in that drive-through line at Starbucks or whatever, right on your way to the office, and then all of a sudden you weren't. You had so many more people had so much more time to all of a sudden, uh, you know, sit and think and analyze their life and their financial situation. And like you said, the information has been there for years now. We've had the internet for a long time now. And so you can find this information, whether it's through Google or YouTube videos or connecting with people on Twitter or whatever the case may be. And yeah, I Tiff that um, COVID was quite an eye-opening event. Um, obviously as bad as it was for so many people. So, so many people lost their lives, which is obviously very unfortunate. Um, but so many people also, like you said, reset their lives, got themselves on a different path, a different journey, a different track. And I've talked to so many of those people here on the podcast where you wouldn't believe out of like, I think I've done 85, 86 individual episodes now with individual people. And I don't even know what the percentage is, but so many people that say, "Oh, I started in 2020," because that's exactly when they suddenly had time to sit and go through everything, right? So
Mhm. And,
positives and negatives come out of everything.
for sure. And just to add on to that, now you're seeing more people that you can resonate with as well. So, whether you're a black female or just a black person in general, or even LGBTQIA, like there's a lot more creators doing personal finance content as well. So regardless of how you identify or what have you, there's someone out there teaching this information that you can probably resonate with. Now, I will say it has been a gift and a curse because there were a lot of social media gurus that are spreading information that's not quite accurate. And so, unfortunately, there were people that just jumped on the bandwagon just so they can make money versus really giving people good information. So I always warn people to always be aware of what you're ingesting, especially on the TikToks and the Instagrams. But, do your own research. So even if you see somebody say something, look it up for yourself, educate yourself on it before you jump head first. And, take it all with a grain of salt. Even with what I say, for instance, always still do your research, don't allow one person to be the end all be all. And then you make a decision off of that and end up in a world of mess. So I just wanted to put that public service announcement out there.
Thank you. Alexis, anything to add to sort of that time frame that we're talking about, the 2020 and COVID?
Not necessarily. I mean, I noticed, I agree with everything Tiffany said. There was also, during that time, we had the opportunity to build up our emergency fund. A lot of money was given out here in the United States at that time. And so those who, I feel like a lot of people probably started to begin to set a foundation. But even now, we have to keep that going because we have no idea where our economy really is because no one's really being honest about it. And the stock market is really not reflecting what's actually happening. So I know for our community, when it comes to job layoffs and such, we're the first ones to be let go. And so we just have to be on our toes at this time with the economy and where we are right now.
Yeah, great point.
And I'll just add, even looking at the more recent news, like with the Supreme Court decisions and things like that, it's going to get really interesting here, September, October, around that time frame, because that's when student loan payments will restart. And if people are, it's been 3 years since we've had to pay. And so, of course, people have built their lifestyle around those 3 years. And so now, if student loan payments have to restart, now we have to start thinking about, okay, where is that money going to come from? Because we haven't had it in so long. And so, it's been a very interesting, 3 years. And so I'm curious to see what things look like going forward. Because, like, to your point with the additional checks we were getting from the government, that stopped, what was it, last year or the year before? And then I was like, oh gosh, people are going to fall off an income cliff. It wasn't as dramatic as I thought it was going to be. It did have some detrimental effects, especially for people that are low income. But now with the student loans, that affects a wider variety of people. So I'm interested to see what that looks like going forward. So we'll see what happens.
I have a quick question for you about those stimulus checks in the U.S. Were those just no questions asked? Every single American got one, and you didn't have to pay income tax on them?
Pretty much, yeah. Mm-hmm.
There was so much. The U.S. gave out so much money. Not
and how often did you get those?
Checks, but with the PPP and all of that, a lot of people labeled it as one of the biggest wealth transfers almost, because a lot of money went into a lot of people's hands. But were they wise with it? Yeah.
And not only that, when it was happening, one thing that I foresaw was what we're going through now, which is inflation. Because if you're just pumping a bunch of money into people's hands, of course they're going to spend it. And then once they spend it, that raises the prices. Once the prices get raised, it's just a whole cycle that we're going through right now. And people were so excited about these stimulus checks and things, which granted, it helped a lot of people get through a really rough time. But at the same time, you can kind of expect what's happening now, and that is the high inflation. So,
Well, they
you
they
know,
printed so much money, right?
Yeah.
mhm. And so it was good on the front end, but now on the back end, it's like, and now everybody's complaining about high prices. But I'm
Yeah.
like, this is just what happens, in
Well, and it wasn't
economies
just
when
the
you do that
US that printed money, like Canada did as well, and so many other
everywhere.
first world nations, like G7 nations, that also just printed a ton of money. And so all of a
Mhm.
sudden you're like, yeah, the writing was on the wall for global inflation. Um, so those stimulus checks, if I'm not mistaken, they were $1,200, and was that like just monthly for a year or 2 years, or how often did they get paid?
Yeah, it was only 3 checks. So there was 2 in one year and then 1 in another year. And then if you had kids, it also varied. So like mine, because I have 3 kids, so well, 2 kids at that time. So it was a little more. But
Right.
and also there was extra PEBT benefits. So like if you had kids that went to public school, the government was also giving you money to feed them, so that was a whole different thing. And then, like she said, there was the PPP loans. There were EDL. Like a lot of people don't talk about EDL, but there were those loans. Well, not loans. Grants, because I even got an EDL grant and I didn't even have to do anything. They were just like, oh, you're a Black small business. Let's go ahead and give you money. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm not going to complain, but
Right.
it was just little stuff like that as well. So, you know.
Not only that, there were certain states that had their own stimulus programs. California was a big one. They were giving
Mm.
out child tax credits on a
Oh
monthly
yeah.
basis. And
Mhm.
Georgia was giving out gas credits. We got 600 extra dollars just for some sort of gas stimulus. So even like the different states had their own stimulus programs outside of that.
Yeah, I forgot about because I was getting the advanced child tax credit payments too, and I forgot all about that. Now, we didn't have a gas thing, but I'm also like, why were they giving gas when you couldn't go nowhere?
That I remember something happened with the gas pipeline that affected the whole southern states. Like,
I do
yeah, they
remember
was like
that.
shut down. But I remember also people were like talking about, okay, guys, this money, they're giving out this money, but they're gonna have to get it back some way. Like
Mhm.
they're gonna try to get it back some way. And here, like you said, here comes inflation
Yeah.
Mhm. And
Taxes.
taxes.
and taxes.
Like, I know here in my city, because this is, well, county based, but in my county, they redid the real estate taxes. So reevaluated everybody's real estate taxes when all of everybody's houses was super high, valued. And so now that affects our taxes for the next 3 or so years, or whenever they do it again. So a lot of governments were also coming in like, oh, let's go ahead and reevaluate these taxes so we can get more
Yeah.
tax money.
That happened here. My mortgage went up $400 this year. And I was like, oh my goodness.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. So, you know, and I mean, I said that from the get go, we're going to have to pay for it some way. Even if they don't ask for the money directly, it's either going to be higher prices, higher taxes, because the money has to come from somewhere. And if you think of the government as a business, their income, their revenue streams are taxes and, things like that. So they have to make up the shortfall somewhere. So,
So I'm just going to give you a quick comparison. Here in Canada, we had a thing called CERB, CERB, Canada Emergency Response Benefit, which was something brand new that they introduced for when COVID happened, and there was only certain people that qualified for it. So basically, like myself, I was considered an essential worker, so I was never out of work, so I never qualified for it. Um, but the caveat was that it was taxable income. So many people got whatever it was, say 2 grand, 4 grand, then, you know, roll around to the following April and they're like, now they have to pay tax on the money that's obviously it's gone by now, right? So I think the Canadian government could have handled it better, but yeah, a lot of people got into and are still in problems with paying back that taxable income from that CERB benefit that they introduced.
So,
Um,
Dave, can I ask you a question about
sure.
that? Um, did they allow people to opt out of getting that payment, or did they just give it to you?
Honestly, like I said, because I didn't qualify for it,
Mm.
all I know about it is sort of what I've heard on the radio, driving back and forth to work. So I don't know if you were able to opt out or not. I imagine most people that qualified for it needed it anyway at the time because those people would have been out of work. Um, so yeah, that's just the way it happened here. And again, um, put money, exact same thing as your stimulus checks, put money into the people's hands that needed it and help the economy at the time, but paying for it later with higher inflation. So take that with a grain of salt, I guess.
But this is important when it relates to investing because long term, those investments will beat that inflation that comes as a result of these things.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, even if you look at last time there was high inflation, like this was, which was like the 70s or so. If you look at the market now compared to the 70s, it's way higher. Even, 2008, 2009 financial crisis is way higher. So, investing is a good hedge, for
Yeah.
some of
Yeah,
this stuff long term.
I think that's so important. You just brought up a good point. Like, like as an investor, we should research these cycles and look to see what happened. That way we know what we can look forward to and we know how to maneuver in these situations.
Yeah,
Mhm.
history does have a tendency to repeat
Repeat
itself.
itself, exactly.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so
For
yeah,
sure.
the more you can identify like historical patterns, um, the better you're going to be at having an indication of what could happen in the future.
Yeah.
For sure. Like honestly, because I love history. So tell me
Me
when to
too.
stop because I nerd out. But honestly, I was looking at when the housing prices were inflated and how everybody was getting approved and stuff for houses. I'm like, oh gosh, here we go, another 2008, 2009. But there were differences this time because now they have, some safeguards in place for that. But, that thought did cross my mind because, watching movies like The Big Short and stuff that kind of detail what exactly happened. And I'm like, oh gosh, here we go again. Like when I see people that, I mean, and not to, it's going to sound so horrible, but I mean this in the nicest way, where that they are not probably able to afford that house or what have you, and they're getting approved. I'm like, woo, okay. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
this is where we are. But, you know, now that things are starting to kind of equal out, you'll probably see more houses going on the market, which I was telling people during that time when the housing market was hot. I'm like, it's hot for now, but if you don't have the wherewithal to make it happen, then just wait because,
Yeah.
they'll go back down. The prices will go back down. Everything runs in cycles. Now, will they be as low as before? Probably not, but they'll be less than what they are now because right now
Right.
it's just really inflated. So,
Yeah, that's a
anywho.
good point because I heard that when the interest rates are really high, the prices of the houses go lower.
Because everything goes off of supply and demand. So when interest rates are low, then the prices have to go up because so many people want to buy. They're like, "Ooh, I want to lock in
Yeah.
this good interest rate." So now I want to buy. Now they're flooding the market with buyers, and there's not enough sellers. So then the sellers are able to get a higher price. But now, as there's less and less buyers because the interest rate has gone up, now the prices are going to have to start coming down to meet that market. So I tell people all the time, definitely learn supply and demand because it affects everything that you put your hands on. And when you understand the concept, then you can look at the things that happen, like 2020, for instance. You can be like, oh, okay, well, I know where it's going to go soon, so you can kind of think through, some of your decisions. Mhm.
Yeah.
I have a
Awesome.
question for both of you guys. If you could recommend one book that helped you navigate through your personal financial journey or investing journey, what would that be?
I'll let you go first on that one, Tiff.
um, so there's quite a few, but I think as far as, okay, I'm gonna give you two. I know you said one, but I'm gonna give you two.
No, that's fine.
So one was Your Money or Your Life by Vicki Robin. And I recommend that one because it makes you think about money differently. So she is the godmother of the FIRE movement. So everybody that talks about the FIRE movement have followed her principles, right? And one thing that she mentions in the book that really hit home for me was think of money in terms of time. So if you want to buy something that's $30 and you make $15 an hour, that's 2 hours of your time that you would have to give up to buy that item. And so when you start thinking about it in terms of time, it makes you look at things a little differently. So highly recommend that just for like a little mindset shift. She had a few good gems in there. And then as far as just like practical personal finance stuff, I really like I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. He has a show on Netflix now, but I really like that book. And he gives very practical advice. I mean, even down to when you call your credit card company, this is what you say, that type of stuff. So I really enjoy that book. I had the first version. I haven't read the second version yet, but I'm sure it's just as good.
Okay, so the very first investing book I read was called The Wealthy Barber. I read this book back in the early 90s. It's by an author called Mr. David Chilton. And that's the really cool thing about Twitter now is that I follow him on Twitter and I can tag him in tweets. And he's like some of my tweets. And it's like, 30 years ago, you would have never thought that. And then the other really cool thing about Twitter is he can now turn down my invitations for him to come on the Passive Income podcast, which he's done several times now. But basically, The Wealthy Barber is where I very first learned or heard of the concept of pay yourself first.
Mhm.
And I believe it was 10%, the number he used in this book of, basically every time you make your paycheck, you take 10%. So if, every time you make any money, even if it's only $100, you take 10% of that and put that $10 into your investment account. And yeah, that's really, resonated with me over the years of pay yourself first and just make sure that you're taking care of yourself first and then pay your bills after that. Um, I'll also give you a second one. The most recent book I read was actually by Dividend John on Twitter. Johnny Boy 1835, I think is. And so he wrote last year, and he actually sent it to me before he came on as a guest on the Passive Income podcast. And so, um, just a very interesting book about dividend investing and a few other really interesting life lessons in that book as well. So, I'd highly recommend both of those books. Johnny Boy or Dividend John's book is called Too Rich to Be Stressed. Um, Basically, at the time, he was at about 67 or $68,000 in annual dividend income, and now more recently, I believe he's up to something like 72 or 73,000. So yeah, I would highly recommend "Too Rich to Be Stressed" by Johnny Boy, and then "The Wealthy Barber" by Mr. David Chilton. They are both very much more Canadian centric, but from some very good lessons in there for anyone, no matter what country you're in.
Mhm.
My two book recommendations would be Simple Path to Wealth by J.L.
Mhm.
Collins and then Money Master the Game by Tony Robbins. Simple Path to Wealth is just like very simplistic, index and chill. Also, setting up your kids on the correct path. And then Money Master the Game is more so becoming like the CFO of your finances. So, yeah.
I'm gonna check that one out.
Before we log off, Ms. Novi did send me a DM here. Actually, I think she sent it to our group chat. My apologies, everyone. Phone overheated and I didn't have it charged. It will keep booting me out. If we could do a part 2, I'll be better prepared. I apologize. Currently charging it. Time got away from me. So, well, thank you, Ms. Novi, for coming on and being here for some of this live stream. And before we sign off, any final thoughts from both of you?
Final thoughts, keep investing, just keep investing, keep building,
Brick by brick,
keep
right?
learning, brick by brick, dollar
Just
by
get
dollar.
started and just
Yes.
keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll say educate yourself. Just keep educating yourself. Even if finance isn't that interesting to you, because I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, there are a lot of people out here that do make it interesting, myself included. So definitely educate yourself on all of these topics. And even if you're like, you know what, I don't even want to invest, DIY, even if you hire someone, at least educate yourself on the basics. So that way you won't get taken advantage of. And that's my big thing for my audience. I'm like, just educate yourself as much as possible, even if you farm it out. So you know what you're talking about and nobody can use that against you. So
Yeah, great points. Educate yourself, do your own research, do your own due diligence. Like Alexis said, and you just keep building brick by brick. So obviously, first you have to just get started. Everyone's heard me call it my Moneyball reference: just get on base, just get on base, right? And whatever it takes, just get on base, and then just keep going. Build, build, build. Learn, learn, build, learn. I think those are all great points. Awesome. Well, I cannot thank you so much for your time. This has been an incredible chat. Fun. Yeah, thank you so much for being on here. And with that said, if you're still here an hour later, please make sure that you have subscribed.